So with that, there's this beautiful thing that I heard Clarissa Estes share. How when a story is told, it becomes night. And the moon, as she's going across the sky, she tends to pause. And she listens in, just as the trees begin to lean in, to listen into the stories and the conversations, and even whisper into our own being messages that are waiting, just trembling just beneath the surface of our being. And tonight, the story that we are sharing is called Ahimsa Manas. Ahimsa Manas. And with that, we shall begin. Om. Long, long ago, in a land far, far away, in a small seaside village, there was a people. And amongst the people, there was a woman named Ahimsa Manas. And Ahimsa Manas was a beautiful woman. And she wasn't beautiful because of the features of who she was. She wasn't the portray of those Roman goddesses we often get the pictures of. Instead, she had that beauty of the spirit of who she was. She had that beauty of someone who had lived a life and had gathered and harvested the many textures that life has to give, and yet can still smile and walk into the day. She had that kind of special beauty. And each morning, she had this routine where Ahimsa, she would walk into the village just at the time when all the shopkeepers were opening their shops, bringing out their colorful wares, bringing up their colorful awnings. And she would greet each one of them and says, "Hello, Sophia. Hello, Thomas." And they would all smile and wave back. And she would arrive back and come to the temple steps. And at the temple steps, there would be these old women who even earlier that day had gone out into the orchards and in the rose fields, chanting their songs of devotion, speaking to the plants and inviting those who were ready to be plucked to fall into their baskets, move into the orchards and asking the fruit who were ripe, who were wanting to be offered up to the gods, and they would fall into their baskets. And the old women chanting and singing their songs of praise as the sun was just breaking open into the day would bring that basket of fruit and roses back to the temple steps, where pilgrims from all around, far and wide, would come to purchase these offerings and bring them up to the gods. And Ahimsa, she would come in and she would speak warmly with all the old ladies, speaking of the subtle nuances of how the day becomes broken open. And she'd always give them a little bit more than they asked for. And she'd get the offerings, these sweet fruits, sometimes even these sweet pastries, because the gods love those sweet things. And she would bring them up, walk up the steps, open the large wooden doors and bring her feet, take off her shoes. And her bare feet would step into that cool temple floor. That musty smell of incense coming through. Walk up to the altar. She would place the fruit and the flowers. Then she would sit and she would do her meditation. She would chant, "Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu." She would sing the chant that meant, "May all beings everywhere be well." And that was the routine of Ahimsa Manas. Now, at some time, a certain strife entered the land. There was conflict amongst the kingdom. People were hearing all sorts of different stories, and they no longer knew what stories to believe. And so the sense of unrest and fear began to enter into the hearts of the people. And Ahimsa, she would walk through the village into the marketplace towards the temple. She noticed as she greeted Sophia and Thomas and Jasmine that they would just kind of wave, but their smiles weren't nearly as bright, not nearly as receptive. She noticed how the colors of the awnings were beginning to fade. And she'd come up to the temple steps with the old women. And she noticed how the flowers were a little more withered and that the fruit wasn't quite, it was a little too ripe, beginning on the decay. But she thought, maybe it's just because there hasn't been any rain. Maybe there's just because of the drought that's been happening. It's a hard time for the farmers. But after a couple weeks, she noted the fruit began to become more rotten. And she mentioned that once to one of the old ladies. So I get all these fruit. They seem not quite as sweet. I don't know if I should be giving these to the gods. And the old woman says, "Oh dear, it's all good. I know they don't look so pretty. And I know, if you take a bite of it, it doesn't necessarily taste so good. But once you take a bite, you can't help but want another. So like, here, take a bite, try and find out for yourself." And Ahimsa, she was a little reluctant. She's like, "Yeah, I don't know. That looks kind of gross." And the old woman was like, "No, please, dear, try." And so she took the fruit. She took a bite. Oh. And sure enough, it didn't taste really all that good. But she couldn't help but take another bite. And then another. And another. Until finally she ate the whole fruit. So she ended up purchasing some of that fruit for herself and for the temple. And she walked up those stone steps into those large wooden doors, took her shoes off, stepped onto the bare feet of the cool temple floor. And she gave those offerings. And sure enough, she saw those fruit be gobbled up by the gods. But she would still go in there and she would chant. And this went on for some time. And she noticed how the awnings of the marketplace became really dark and dirty and how the fruit just seemed more rotten. But it was just what all they wanted anymore. Until one day, as Ahimsa Manas was walking into town on her morning routine, she heard something. She heard something that stirred that which was trembling just beneath the surface of her being. And it was a laughter. An unbridled laughter, a laughter of just pure joy. And it made her turn in such a way to look where that laughter was coming from. And when she looked, she saw this young girl turn and look at her with these bright, joyous eyes. And it stirred a remembrance inside of Ahimsa Manas. And so that morning, instead of walking out into the marketplace, she took the path that walked out of the village. Along this path, beside a burbling creek, beneath the big leaf maples and that sweet spring smell of the cottonwoods. And she would breathe in that cool air as the little breeze that would caress her skin. And she would eat of the huckleberries and the salmon berries, and those sweet flavors would fill her mouth. And she saw a little deer that kind of came across her path down into the creek and into the other side of the old fern groves. And in that moment, she felt her heart become broken open. And she took in this deep breath. And in that moment of the breath, she realized she hadn't taken a deep breath in for some time. That she had been breathing these shallow breaths from her chest. That her mind had become anxious and fearful, and she had not even noticed. And she took in another of that deep breath. She just felt this giggle erupt inside of her. And then suddenly she noticed that somebody was watching her. Somebody was looking at her, and she looked to her side, and there was a strange old man, crazy old beard and kind of crooked eyes, and he's just smiling at her. And it startled her, and he says, "Oh, Ahimsa, welcome back." And Ahimsa says, like, "Oh, thank you, but I think you might have me confused with somebody else. I don't think I've ever been here." And the old man just chuckled. "Oh, Ahimsa, of course you've been here many times. It's just that, those old demon gods, they took over the temple and they've been giving out all that rotten fruit. And it's given everyone amnesia. So no one just remembers anymore. It's all good." Now, Ahimsa Mana, she was like a little taken aback, like in disbelief. She's like, demon gods taking over the temple? She's like, "I don't think so." So, like, I should know. I go to that temple every single day. I would know. And the old man says, "Well, tomorrow, why don't you just take a peek behind the curtain and look for yourself and see what you see? But make sure you don't eat the fruit before going. Otherwise, they'll only see what you want to see." Next day, as Ahimsa Manas walked through the marketplace, she thought of what the old man said. She got her offerings, went up the temple steps through those large wooden doors, bare feet onto the cool temple floors. And she put that offering onto the altar, but she made sure not to eat any of herself. And sure enough, she peeked behind the curtain, and what she saw were these demon gods laughing and joking how they were fooling all the people. And she saw how the old gods were tied up in the corner with this magical rope, and the demon gods were taking their fruit and throwing it at the gods and laughing. And Ahimsa, she was shocked. She very carefully walked out of the temple onto that path along the burbling creek up to the old man. And she's like, "Old man," she's like, "you were right. But what can we do? I hear them joking how they're fooling all the people. And they have us eating this rotten fruit. What can we do?" The old man says, "I know what you can do, Ahimsa. This is what to do." She's like, "You have to go just before nightfall. And you go down to the harbor there. And you have to steal one of those ships and sell it out of the harbor across the Sea of Animus to the Isles of the Agni Dragon. And there, here, take this bag." Has this bag, gives it over to her. He says, "You take this bag, the instructions are in it, you'll know what to do. You make this little decoction for that dragon, and you'll help to heal the dragon if you are brave enough. You can do it and talk to him. And if you do it just right, the dragon may give you this golden fruit that you can bring back. And you put it on the altar, and you'll set the old gods free." Now, Ahimsa Mana says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. You want me to do what?" So, like, no, 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 no. I don't know how to sell a ship. I'm scared of water. I mean, how am I supposed to fight a dragon? It's like, I don't think I can do that, old man. And the old man just smiled. It's like, "Ahimsa Manas, you can do this. You are so much more powerful and so much stronger than you can ever imagine. You just have to walk that path, and everything you need to know will come to you." He said, "Here, take this lantern." He gives this lantern as this golden light in it. "And here's some fruit. This is the fruit that I brought back when I also took the journey to the dragon. Anytime you start to doubt yourself, anytime you start to feel you're losing your way, that lantern is going to dim. But take a bite of this fruit and remember how you felt the other day when you came here and you were breathing in the forest. You were listening in to the burbling sounds of the creek and the birds, the sensations on your skin, all the smells and tastes. Remember that, and the light will come bright and guide you through the storm of the sea, and you will know what to do. Now go, 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 go." Now, Ahimsa Mana, she was, I don't know, maybe this old man's a little kooky, I don't know. But she felt this calling. She had to do this, not just for herself, but for the others. So she went down to the harbor just at dusk. She found a boat that wasn't too big and not too small, that had a great sail that she can steal, unroped it from the dock and set off, using the rudder to kind of help push herself out of the harbor. The sails came down, the wind blew, and she began to set sail across the Sea of Animus. Now, it wasn't long after she set sail and broke away from the safety of the cove that this big storm came blowing in. Huge, strong winds, torrential rains. The waves began to become huge, and the boat began to sail up and down. She began to doubt herself, and sure enough, the light began to get dim. And she's like, oh no, I gotta remember. So she took the fruit and she bit into that fruit. And she remembered being back in the forest when her heart was being broken open. The taste of the salmon berries and huckleberries, the sounds of the burbling creek. And that strength came back into her. And the light of the lantern became strong. And it guided her across that stormy sea. But finally she landed at the Isle of the Agni Dragon. She tied up her boat. She put her feet on that solid ground and she was so grateful. But it wasn't long until it started shaking, rumbling, and she heard this roar coming from the naked slate stone mountain on the island. And she looked over and she saw this little opening in the mountain, like a cave. So she took the bag and she took the drum that also the old man gave her. And she walked into the cave till she came to the edge and she peeked over and she looked out and she saw the huge dragon. But she also saw the remains of those who came before her, those warriors who brought the beheaded enemies of their enemy clans, those who brought the sword to slay the dragon. And she was fearful. She was scared and she thought maybe I should return. But then she took out the bag and she looked in and there was a note and had these instructions. And inside the bag, there was sweet cucumbers and mangoes and fresh mint. And there was this magical cauldron and this goblet. And the instructions helped her make this decoction out of the mangoes and the cucumbers and mint. And she brought it forward out into where the dragon was. And the dragon looked down. It's like, oh, I thought I smelled a human. All right, little girl, how is it you think you can slay me, the dragon? And Ahimsa, she says, oh, dragon, I did not come here to slay you. I came here to be of service to you. It's like I can sense the burning in your throat with all that fire. I too would be angry and irritable if I had that burning. So I've made you this cooling decoction that you could soothe your throat. Now the dragon is not used to people being kind to him. Thought this might be a trick. But he also says, you know, I'm a dragon. What can she do to me? So he's like, I'll try it. So he took the goblet. He sips it in. And that cooling sensation soothed the fire of his throat. And he looked down and goes, who are you? And she said with a voice that is strong yet kind, I am Ahimsa. And I can see, dragon, I can see that you have this rage inside of you. I can see you have all of this that you're holding inside because you have not drummed and sung the songs to the moon goddess. You have not danced and released all that you're holding inside into the ebb and flows of the tide. She goes, let me drum for you. So she started to drum. And the dragon began to feel the beat. And he began to sing, and he began to dance and sing, and he released through his movement and his voice all that he had been holding inside. And he released it to the ebbing tides, gave it as sacred offerings to the moon goddess. And eventually he felt restored. He says, Ahimsa Manas, thank you for your gifts of healing. He says, normally warriors only come here and they bring the decapitated heads of their enemies. They bring their swords that are sharp. He's like, all that does is infuriate me. But you have brought these healing medicines. You have brought cooling to where I used to just only have fire. He's like, let me give you this fruit, the golden fruit. And he brought it from his chest. And he put it down in this basket. And he says, this fruit is magical. He says, every time you give it, your fruit will multiply. And when you give it to others, it will bring back the spirit of their own hearts and their minds. Take it back now and bring it to the temple. And you just may release the old gods that they could chase the demon gods away and bring abundance back to the land. So with that, Ahimsa Manas took the basket of fruit back to the ship. She untied it. She sailed more confidently now across the sea of Animus. And she arrived back at her village just in the morning. And every time she passed one of the stalls, the store owner, she gave one of the fruit. And they would bite into it, and then she noticed how the glow of their skin came back again. Their eyes, which had been cloudy for some time, became bright and clear. She brought it to the temple steps with the old women, and she gave the fruit. Every time she gave one fruit, 2 fruit would multiply in her basket. And the old woman ate of that. And he realized the fruit that they had been rotten, and they tossed it to a side. And with her basket in hand, she walked up the steps to the temple, up through those huge wooden doors. She took her shoes off and stepped barefoot on the cool floor of the temple, that musky smell of the incense wafting in. Walked up to the altar, and she put the fruit right on the altar. And the demon gods, not thinking anything mischievous, just snatched it up and started eating it. And as soon as they ate it, the demon gods, they lost all their power. And the magical rope that had been tied around the old gods fell away. And the old gods chased the demon gods away. And they came back and they gave thanks to Ahimsa Manas. Thank you for restoring the temple to its rightful place. And for the pilgrims who came from far and wide, everyone who came, they received some of the magical fruit. And their minds became clear, their hearts became open, the rains returned to the farmlands, and life again began to flourish. And so that is the story of Ahimsa Manas. Boom. So take a moment and just kind of feel into that story. And where do you land in that story? What images take hold? What are your pressure points? Just take a moment and feel into that.